Cutters, Degrassi, unpopular opinions. Hey there, Heather, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter. I welcome you to another Degrassi unpopular opinion, kind of slash hot take, or whatever. So anyway, this CDUO is to talk about a plot line in the old school Degrassi. I'm talking Degrassi High, not Next Gen. Before Next Gen happened. So basically, someone did a Reddit post a week and a bit ago, and for context, it's been taped December 7th, 2021, and it said something about Claudes' suicide plot in Degrassi High did not age well. This is from Below the Dots, the person who's basically blasting me for saying Smack had a downfall. But I get it. Anyway, I say this. Anyway, it goes, I hate to say it, because I love Degrassi Classic, and it's underrated. But Claude's suicide point in Degrassi High did not age well at all. In fact, I think it's actually painfully unsympathetic to the idea of depression and suicide. Claude is not a popular character, but I felt sorry for him. Below the Dot said about their own struggles with mental health and all that. I don't like how the writers seem to vilify Claude's depression and ideation and use it against more popular characters. Claude's suicide is portrayed as manipulative, and the lack of compassion most of the other characters seem to have just hurts to watch. They portray him as some coward and paint his mental health struggles and self-inflicted death in not a sympathetic light. They made sure to traumatize two characters. Snake with finding him, and Caitlin because he quote-unquote manipulated her, so you feel nothing for Claude. Not to mention they give his other issues a 2-second mention in the episode he does it in. His parents are divorced, he can't stay with his mother because her boyfriend hates him, and his dad doesn't really like him. I feel like with Claude, they wanted to portray how suicide hurts others, but in doing this, they failed to focus on the hurting that's happening within the person who committed suicide. They just wrote it off as some manipulative coward, and bittersweet sympathy actually reminds us of how much progress has been made in understanding depression and suicide. Alright, so somebody said they definitely handled it better with Cam. Regarding the long-term impact such an event has on others and portraying his depression and self-harm compassionately with a real sense of pathos. We spent a whole season with Cam, but not a lot with Claude. Someone said, in seeing the suicide episode, I feel like it validated him leaving Caitlin when she got her leg caught on the fence. He knew what his parents were like, and he couldn't be arrested for vandalism because they already hated him. A lot of people said that it hasn't aged in the Living Grace says it hasn't aged in the sense of how we deal with suicide, even if it's occurring in a public place or even a school. Nobody hears a gunshot. Allegedly, there is. It takes too long for the school to even realize there's an issue. They don't really send everyone home as I imagine they do now. They kind of did. Like, they sent them home early. Actually, it is. Yeah. And Livian says, Joan's the only one that speaks up for Claude. And sex people don't support her much at all. They don't think she's sabotaging the show. The charity thing. I mean, sabotaging the showtime and making it about raising money isn't really that tasteful a response either. It was a contentious issue. There was a different attitude to teen suicide back then. The media did nothing to help. Resources were underfunded. Some are. And there wasn't support or understanding. It's a time capsule of the show, Degrassi High is. Someone said, I think the message Degrassi was sending in the 80s was, hey, you, don't commit suicide. You'll hurt other people. Teenage suicide, don't do it. Versus we can't. Anyone you know might be hurting. Depression doesn't need to have a traumatic reason. People respond to suicide in different ways. I think Claude's episode, Aging Poorly, is a good thing because it points out how much progress has been made and all that. So, yeah. Accomplished Cup said, because there was a difference between the two. As someone who struggles with depression and has been struggling it for years, Claude did it to be selfish and manipulative. That's how they wanted to portray it. He had friends and people who cared about him. He knew that, but Caitlin wouldn't give him the time of day anymore, and he knew what it would do to her. That's why he sent the flowers. He wanted her to feel bad for not loving him. He wanted her to feel guilty. He wanted her to feel like it was her fault. With Cam, they clearly wrote it better. We saw the ups and downs of depression and all that one. And Seabuddy said, not everyone that suffers from mental illness is a good person. They deserve some sympathy, but it doesn't excuse the bad behavior of any. He deserved to be punished when he got Caitlin in trouble. He was selfish. And him committing suicide was his way of getting back at people. Claude did it for selfish reasons. He wanted to hurt Caitlin in the worst possible way. And, they talk about Rick and all that, too, about his mental health issues. So, yeah. Yeah, Claude was a little. Rachel Violetta said that it's biased that I'm the only one that liked Claude. They did it with his character because he wasn't liking all that. It was a teen suicide PSA. I had a huge problem with them still having the talent show right after Claude's suicide. It was unrealistic. The school would have canceled the talent show and held the vigil for victims of suicide. But the producers were clear. They wanted to make it unsympathetic and reflected in the episode that Claude would have wanted the vigil because it would have given him the love, fame, and popularity he never would have gotten while alive. And they botched it. The students were so unsympathetic to Claude that he was nearly demonized and all of that. Claude was underused and all that. It's like no one cared about Claude except for Caitlin, Snake, and Joanne. All that. Claude was a good character, but a lot of people say that stuff, especially Cindy saying he's in hell and all that. So yeah, there's a lot of things to do with Claude and all that. So, all right, so they have their things. Here's my thoughts. I kind of liked this plot because it goes with it goes with the times. You know how a lot of people said, oh, Spike's pregnancy storyline, which will be another unpopular opinion I'll do sometime soon, and said that all this hate to Spike and all that wasn't warranted. But here's the thing. Just like Claude's suicide, this is a different time. This is the 2020s now. But things 30, 40 years ago were a whole lot different. There were different governments, there were different social conventions and all of that. There were the fact that minorities and women did not have a lot of freedoms and all that stuff we do now 40 years later, and we've been struggling to put this forward. The problem is that the writers did it with the times, not conveying the fact that, how did people act about suicides in the 80s and 90s? A whole lot different than nowadays in 2010s and 2020s. The fact of the matter is that Claude was a terrible character, especially for what he did to Caitlin. Like leaving her high and dry, forcing Caitlin to go to court and have community service placed on her. Like, what type of dick does that? And, Caitlin was enamored with Claude, and they both wanted to save the environment, and then Claude just left Caitlin high and dry. It's like, what the hell? That's why Caitlin didn't want to deal with Claude. Claude wanted Caitlin back, but he screwed himself over by having Caitlin ignore him and all that. And the fact of the matter is that Claude said he had nothing going, and Joanne tried to help Claude. I like Joanne very much. She at least trying to help Claude out, but Claude wouldn't have any of Joanne's helping. And then Claude kills himself in the bathroom. Allegedly, you hear a shot, but I guess that's what you get when you get like new sound technology and all that stuff. And then Snake finds his body in the stall, alerts Raj, the VP. He wasn't the principal, remember, of Degrassi High. And then that starts a response in such a way that they close off the bathroom for the investigation. Like they'll send the students home. All students are put in a classroom, certain classrooms, and teachers are told about what happened to Claude. And they talk about Claude and all that. Raj does a good move taking care of one of the classes that had Tabitha, that other bully, that Dwayne and the other guy. I don't know what his name is, but anyway, in that little group. And then you had Joanne, and then you had Trish, the one with the mohawk. And Trish was comforting Joanne, and a few other people were comforting her too. And Joanne said that I should have done a lot. And Raj said, you can't help someone who doesn't want help, Joanne. and all that. And Raj makes a poignant speech about how we all feel overwhelmed sometimes, but suicide's not the answer because once you do it, everything is over and you can't come back from it. Like, and then a lot of people said these feelings about maybe Claude did it to make us all feel bad. Like Lucy said it. Like, I understand completely because of the way Claude was. Claude was not a popular character, and if Claude wasn't popular, then he probably wants the attention and all that. Well, at the school, he could have killed himself at home and it would have been different, but he killed himself at the school to make everyone feel bad. I don't hate them for saying that. It is what it is. I mean, that's the first thought that goes through your head. It's not the right thought, but it's the first thing that goes through your head. How could this have happened? And then they're like, maybe he did it for attention and all that. And then they jumped on that bandwagon, if you will. Like, I don't hate the Degrassi people for that. I mean, I like the fact that they tried their best to handle this in the right possible way. And, a lot of people think suicide's a sin and all that. I understand. And saying that, suicide's terrible and that, people probably make suicide to try to make people feel bad. And that's how Caitlyn was. Claude sent the roses to try to get at Caitlyn. He wanted Caitlyn to feel bad about rejecting him. I mean, it's a selfish action. And, Claude shouldn't be forgiven for his actions. But the fact of the matter is that Claude is human, just like everyone else. He had his mental anguishes. He didn't really tell people about his mental anguishes. I think he might have got help if he told people. And the person said that, things were underfunded in the 40 years ago. I would agree. But the fact is that Claude could have been proactive and done something about it. And if he got no help, then, he kills himself, then things would have been different. But the simple fact was that Claude's suicide plot was actually good because it taught people about suicide. And it also has the message that says that people jump to conclusions that, Claude did it out of selfishness and all that. Joey tells Caitlyn that Claude purposely did that because Claude wanted Caitlyn to suffer in his death. And that's why he haunted Caitlyn in her dreams and all that. And Joey says that don't give him any attention because that's what his plan was, especially with the flowers. Joey figures that, Claude set himself up on purpose and all that. And then, they still go ahead with the talent show, but they did it as a benefit for bully teens. Spike has the bright idea for that. I mean, it's the best of both worlds. Like, the talent show goes ahead, but they do it in honor of Claude in a sense. But maybe, yeah. And the person might have been right about Vigil, saying that Claude probably wants people to pay attention to him and all that. But I think that Claude's Vigil would have been scarcely attended, if anything, because I think people would have gotten away with it. It reminds me of Rick when he died in season 4 of Next Gen. It's like, how many people went to like his visitation and funeral? I mean, Toby went there because, he was Rick's only true friend and was unsure about it because, his mom, Rick's mom. And then Manny helps Toby deal with it. And then JT comes to comfort Toby and realize that Toby should not be punished for what Rick did, in a sense. And then, it's like, well, who else would have been at the funeral and all that? But I think that a lot of students would have been not at Rick's funeral for 2 reasons. Number one is because, Rick's a monster who shot Jimmy and could have shot other people if he had the capability and if it wasn't for Sean. And number 2 is that, maybe some students felt guilty about bullying Rick and didn't want to let their guilt show. And maybe they just wanted to avoid having to deal with a place that would make them spill their guts about guilt. It's like Spitter in the hospital. He rarely went to the hospital for Jimmy, where he should have went to the hospital for Jimmy. And if he could hold it in, I think Jimmy would not have been as angry as he was. Although Jimmy said that getting mad at you takes too much energy. But the fact of the matter is that, they didn't want to sympathize with Claude. Now that's the thing, though, too, because, Claude had problems with Caitlyn and all that. And then people are going to be like, oh, well, we can't be sympathetic for that. I understood. It's like Cam. It's like, what harm did Cam do? I mean, Sigs hated Cam because, Sig was after Maya, and then Cam and Maya. It's the love triangle, and Sig was a jealous prick who seemed to always be jealous of Maya, especially when Maya's with a guy that he wants to be that guy, and when he's with Maya, he doesn't really care about her as much. I call it the Veronica effect from the Archie comics. Veronica only wants Archie because Betty wants him. And when Betty breaks up with Archie to be with Adam for a few issues of comics, Veronica just says, "Screw it, I don't want to deal with Archie. I mean, the competitive viruses are gone. I should date someone else." Even though Archie says, "You know what? I'll date Veronica and stick it to Betty." He didn't. It didn't work. Veronica dumped Archie off. But I mean, yeah, Claudes. I agree with everyone saying that Claude's tactics were to get on Caitlyn's bad side. But what if Claude wasn't trying to destroy Caitlyn? It would have just been like, oh shit, we had the wrong message. We screwed everything up. I would agree. I would totally agree. But this was huge because this would tell about teen suicides and all that. And little did we know that it would actually have some credence with both Rick and Cam's deaths. With Cam, it's like this whole suicide angle, and they changed everything up. But with Rick's, as I said in one of my Degrassiisms about comparisons between the Rick situation and the Claude situation from Degrassi High, one of the biggest things was that, in death they haunted their haunted people who spurned them. Like, Caitlyn spurned Claude and Emma spurned Rick, and both guys were upset that the girls would spurn them like that, and they kind of haunted them. I mean, Caitlyn was haunted until Joey snapped her out of her funk and said that Claude did this on purpose to get at you, and it's working. Don't give him the time of day. And Emma had her zombie Emma phase because she figured she was guilty of starting this whole Rick bullying thing, even though it wasn't her fault. I mean, yeah, she has the idea, but the fact of the matter is the students took her orange ribbon cost the incorrect way and all that. And it was just her frustrations that Raj wasn't going to help with the situation. They took that aggression out and put Emma in a bad spot. And then, the gonorrhea attack helped Emma realize she had to snap out of it. So, yeah, I suggest you look at the Degrassiisms playlist that I usually hawk and look for the video about the similarities between Rick and Claude. I think you'd be surprised. So anyway, thanks for watching this diatribe of mine. And, I liked this episode. It actually worked out that it got people talking about suicide. Isn't that what the best option was?